Start.
Oh,
Okay.
all right. Okay, so I guess I'll be looking a little bit at this camera, but also we have several people in the room, so the camera is weird. But anyway, welcome everybody to Elm Community Insight, our Saturday Sangha. We are graced with the presence of Aishah Shahidah Simmons today, who will be leading our sit. If you haven't been here before to our Sangha, and I see some new faces, so welcome. I'll let Aishah tell us what her kind of rhythm is going to be today. What I just want to highlight for everybody is that we are a small but mighty Sangha, and we are inviting people in as a way of generosity in terms of you just being here, an incredibly generous act because we can't exist without you. And also any financial generosity will go to the library who hosts us, freely given. And so we like to make donations to them. And we also have a pretty active food drive to feed people in the New Haven area who are experiencing food insecurity and are homeless. And then your generosity also goes towards helping us continue to bring people in and for teachers to guide myself and Joy as we lead the Sangha. So that's where your support, your financial support goes to help us. So I'll put a link online, and for people here, there are cards in the back that'll tell you our website. So with that, I think, Aishah, I'm going to hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. One quick question in terms of is people can give Dana on at elmcommunityinsight.org. Is that how they do that?
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat.
Okay.
I'll put the donation on the chat. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. I'm going to remove the spotlight and make sure that we're all muted. Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone is well. Sorry, just doing everything. All right. So welcome this June 10th, 2023 to Elm Community Insights weekly gathering. So the way in which the schedule will go today is that I will guide a meditation, and then we will take a break, and then I will give a talk. So let us begin with the guided meditation. So I invite you to take a moment to settle and arrive, body and mind together, wherever you are. If you're on Zoom, if you're in person at the New Haven Public Library, but just wherever you are, to just arrive, connecting the mind and body together. And you can invite you to find a comfortable posture, sitting, standing, or lying down, where you can feel a sense of alertness and ease. You may want to close your eyes or lower your gaze, turning or inclining your intention to the sense doors to support you coming in to the present moment. And those sense doors are the eyes and the nose and the mouth and the ears and the body and the mind, all of those doors that bring our attention outward, so if we can turn them inward. And just want to invite you to focus on the sounds that you may be aware of. My voice speaking or other sounds where you are located. It may be the sound of silence, which is the absence of sound. Try not to get caught up in the story around the sound. Just be aware of the sound. sound for sound's sake. And when we do that, we are cultivating wise attention. And as you pay attention to the sound, are you aware of your breath? The in breath, inhaling, exhaling. You may feel it just below the nostril, above the upper lip. You may feel your chest rising and contracting. You may feel your abdomen also rising and contracting with the breath. When you inhale, are you aware of the vast space? It is said that we are more space than we are matter. When you exhale, are you tuning in to relaxing the body? So focusing on the sounds and the breath. What are you tuning into? Is it the sound? Is it breath? Is it the sensations of your body sitting or standing or lying down on the earth beneath you, holding you unconditionally? Are you aware of the felt sense of the breath moving throughout your body? Are you aware of the sounds? This is the present moment. The sounds, the breath, the sensations are our anchors to keep us in the present moment. They help us to see that nothing is actually happening when we are focused on our anchors. I mean, yes, the body is breathing and hearing and feeling, but that's what's happening. This is wise attention. Now, the mind will pull us into the mental world that is often the conscious and unconscious backdrop of thinking about things, fixing problems, judging things, imagining the future, taking us completely out of the present moment, of sounds, of the in breath and out breath, of the bodily sensations. Can you notice the frenetic energy that emerges when you're pulled into that world outside of the present moment? And when that happens, can you gently and compassionately bring your awareness to the present moment through your breath, through the sounds, through the bodily sensations? And each time that you bring awareness back, can you do it without shame, without blame, without judgment, without fixing? Just bringing it back. If your mind is wandering, see if you can incline the direction to curiosity and openness. There isn't anywhere to get to. We are here, focused on our breath, sounds, bodily sensations. We are letting go of judgment, fixing, comparison, and blame. And we are practicing practice, not practicing for results. May we honor the only home we all share, planet Earth, and express gratitude that despite so much degradation, she hasn't expelled all of us. May we remember and honor the indigenous custodians of the unceded land wherever you are practicing on right now. May we remember and honor those who came before us and upon whose shoulders we stand and from whose sacrifices we benefit. We are because they were. We wouldn't be here in this form and in this location without our ancestors, known and unknown, loved, and yes, even disliked. We wouldn't be here without the land. May we remember and honor the keepers of the teachings and practices that provide a sense of love and safety. I express gratitude for the indigenous peoples in Africa, in Asia, in the Americas, and their descendants for their sacred teachings, which inform my contemporary practices. We are held together by the universe. We are held together by Earth in the powerful force of gravity. And we are held together in this space, in person, at the library, and on the virtual Zoom waves. We are held with each other. Thank you for your practice. I wanted to share before we segue that I was scheduled to give a talk, I think on the 22nd. I'm not sure the exact date. Let me look at my calendar just a moment. On the 27th during Memorial Day weekend. I was scheduled to give a talk on May 27th, but due to my schedule, I had to cancel. And I decided I wanted to just share some thoughts I began writing in preparation for the Dharma talk that I wasn't able to give in May, which in the United States is Asian American and Pacific Islander and Native Hawaiian Heritage Month. And so what I began writing was erasure is something that I know intimately based on being a Black woman who was a feminist lesbian and a survivor of sexual violence during childhood and young adulthood. And based on this, I pay close attention to not inadvertently, at best, erase others, especially those upon whose shoulders I stand and teachings I practice. As a Buddhist and mindfulness meditation teacher, it is critical for me that I not only acknowledge, but also express gratitude for the Pan-Asian ancestors and contemporary practitioners for studying, for teaching, for protecting, and generously sharing beyond their communities of origin the practices of sitting meditation, walking meditation, chanting meditation, and other sacred rituals continuously from generation to generation to generation to generation for over 2,500 years. Were it not for this dana, this generosity, we probably wouldn't be connected today in this or any Sangha or community practicing together as Dharma and mindfulness practitioners. The first Buddhist Sanghas were in Asia. The first Buddhist Sanghas in the United States were Asian. Whether we identify as Buddhist or not, if we practice any form of mindfulness that's religious, that's spiritual, that's psychological, that's sacred, that's secular, or even atheist, we wouldn't be practicing it were it not for a brown South Asian man named Siddhartha Gautama, who at the age of 35 awakened after many years, and many would say lifetimes, of trying. The awakened one, the Buddha, didn't keep these teachings and practices to himself. He dedicated the last 45 years of his life to teach and share the practices that lead to awakening. Buddha said, "Be a lamp unto yourself." My acknowledgement of the origins of these very ancient teachings from Asia that we are practicing contemporarily in the United States through our 21st century experiential lenses is not to discourage anyone from bringing all of your multiple identities embodied into one to your regular practices. Dhamma, Dharma, mindfulness is for all. I share this as an invitation that we frequently remember and pay respect to those known and unknown Asians who made what we practice possible. While it is important to highlight this in May, we can also highlight this reality at any moment at time that we practice alone or together. In her article, "We've Been Here All Along," Dr. Fanny Su writes, and I quote, "To be clear, Buddhism belongs to all sentient beings. Even so, Asians and Asian American Buddhists have a rightful, distinct, historical claim to Buddhism. It has been rooted in our cultures for thousands of years. When it is said that Buddhism has been practiced for over 2,500 years, it is important to consider who has been persistently maintaining the practice for millennia: Asians, and more recently, Asian Americans. It is because of our physical, emotional, and spiritual labor, our diligent cultivation of the practice through time and through histories of oppression, that Buddhism has persisted to the current time period and can be shared widely with non-Asian practitioners. This is historical fact. To not acknowledge the labor and contributions of Asian American Buddhism in the development of American Buddhism is simply cultural appropriation. Everyone can benefit from reflecting on what that means as a way to deepen our Buddhist practice. And we can do this by using the 5 precepts as a guide, close quote. So I will share the link of this really beautiful article for hopefully sharing in next week's ECI's newsletter, and invite everyone to read the article by Fanny Su in its entirety. And so now I will welcome us to take a 7-minute break where you may want to hydrate or stretch or practice walking meditation or journal. I will ring the gong to signify the end of the break, which will be at 15 minutes after the hour. Thank you. Welcome back. So June is recognized as LGBTQIA month, Pride Month, and it is also the month where Juneteenth was recently named a federal holiday 2 years ago. And for people who may not know the origins of Pride, it started as an uprising in June 1969 at the Stonewall Inn in New York City. This uprising was in response to consistent homophobic and transphobic police violence routinely committed against Black, Latina, and white trans women, men, drag queens, butch lesbians, and other members of the LGBTQIA community. And over time, the following few years, people start march to commemorate the uprising, and over time, it became known as Pride. The whole month became known as Pride June. And for people who may not know the origins of Juneteenth, and these are very abbreviated, simplistic origins, but just to set context, on June 19th, 1865, 2 years after President Abraham Lincoln emancipated enslaved Africans in America, Union troops arrived in Galveston, Texas, with news of freedom. So for 2 years, people who were enslaved didn't know that they had been emancipated. And so during that time on the June 19th in 1865, more than 250,000 African Americans embraced freedom by the executive decree in what became known as Juneteenth, or Freedom Day. And so now we recognize this. It used to be kind of a regional celebration, and now it is recognized nationally as a federal holiday. So past is often prologue. And if we don't learn from the past and are accountable to it, we run the risk of repeating it, and which is an example of causes and conditions. And so I've been thinking about my talk. I reflect on how it is really almost impossible to not be alarmed about the state of our very fragile democracy in the US, with rampant gun violence killing children and adults. The political arena feels like it's descending into high drama that borders on reality television. Yet it isn't reality TV. It's impacting all of our lives. The Supreme Court overturning Roe v. Wade and its impact on any childbearing cisgender woman, transgender, or non-binary person with a uterus. Police and other forms of violence and its racist impact on minoritized communities continues to be relentless. The US serves as the world's leader of incarcerated people, with disproportionate rates of Black and Latina, Indigenous, Asian men, women, and non-binary people, and children who are incarcerated under some form of societal control. The banning of books and words in some jurisdictions in the US. And since it is Pride Month, and even if it weren't, I believe it's important to give a year-to-date snapshot of the anti-LGBTQ state legislative activity. Over 540 anti-LGBTQ bills have been introduced in state legislatures, a record that continues to grow, and 220 of those bills specifically target transgender and non-binary people, another record. 45 anti-LGBTQ laws have been enacted so far this year, including laws banning gender-affirming care for transgender youth, laws requiring or allowing misgendering of transgender students, laws targeting drag performances, laws creating a license to discriminate, laws censoring school curriculum, including books. and climate change is impacting Earth at devastating rates. And despite all attempts to live in outer space and even virtual space through, artificial intelligence and virtual reality, Earth is still presently our only shared home in the universe, from the North Pole to the South Pole and all of the places in between. And we all have experientially know this based on, at least those of us in the Northeast corridor, the impact of the Canadian fires and how the smoke made its way down. And we know about the fires in California that have happened and how it has just decimated homes and earth, wreaking havoc on our lungs and wreaking havoc on Earth's lungs, trees, which we need to literally survive. And I've shared in other contexts that recently the former CBS News anchor Dan Rather reminded us that the earth is just not as big as we'd like to imagine. And as Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. wrote, 60 years ago, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all of us indirectly. And so we're experiencing these harsh realities that millions from across the world are experiencing, and that's poor air quality. And what are those practices that can support us in times of despair, all of the despair that I just shared, but also in times of joy? We tend to look for a way out when we're struggling with despair and fear and anger and anxiety, realizing that when we practice regularly, independent of if we feel bad or not, we are cultivating a new habit muscle and building reserves for when the struggle or suffering comes at us with full blast. We can rely on this. We have something to fall back on. And for me, it's those heart practices known in Buddhism as the Brahmaviharas, which is translated as the great abodes, the divine dwellings, the divine abodes. They are those heart winds beneath our sails. They are mind states that we can rest and find refuge in. They are wholesome qualities of mind where we can introduce what arises and passes away with grace. Now, there are entire retreats ranging from 1 day to 30 days to 3 months to 1 year, solely focusing on learning and practicing the Brahmaviharas. And sometimes it's just on one of the 4 Brahmaviharas. I believe one needs at the bare minimum, 4 to 6 hours just to get a foundational glimpse of the practices. So we're not here for 4 to 6 hours today. So what I will share is just an overview, because it is impossible to teach the Brahmavihara practices in a short talk. But I felt called to talk about them today. These practices are 4 expressions of love in their purest and fiercest sense. They are each characteristics of freedom that build on each other. I want to share them in the sequential order that I learned and that we're usually taught. However, it is important to know, to remember that they are interrelated, they are interconnected. They are in a circular dance with each other. The first one is mettā, which is the Pali word loosely translated as loving kindness and friendliness. The second one is Karuna. This is the Pali word. Pali is the original language of the Buddha, which is translated to mean compassion. The third one is Mudita. Again, the Pali word, which is translated to mean sympathetic or empathetic or vicarious joy. And the fourth one is upekkhā, which is translated to mean equanimity and balance. Dharma teacher Sebene Selassie, an author of the book You Belong, shared that mettā is the heart that cares. It is foundational to all of the Brahmaviharas or heart practices. Karuna is the heart that responds. Mudita is the heart that delights. And upekkhā is the heart that allows. Dharma teacher Ruth King, an author of Mindful of Race, Transforming Racism from the Inside Out, shares that the Brahmaviharas each represent the different flavors of our mind, and in Buddhism, cittā, which is known as the heart mind. These practices invite us to teach something that we deeply are and know. And because of a conditioning that begins at birth, if not while we're in utero, it is often covered up. When we practice mettā, when we practice karuna, mudita, and upekkhā, they support our keeping love. And again, I'm talking about non-attached, unconditional love in its purest sense, with anyone we meet or situation we face, no matter how challenging or difficult. With loving kindness, we learn how to maintain a healthy goodwill for all, including those who are hostile, to have a balanced compassion for those, including ourselves, who encounter tragic suffering, to experience vicarious joy through others' good fortune. And as my teacher, Tereri Sala, often points, the joy that we can often tap into when we are with a baby or toddler who is just happy, just remembering that joy that we often see and experience when we're with those happy babies and happy toddlers. And to feel an equanimous love, a balanced love for those we cannot help. These qualities are of the heart mind or cittā because they are firm when the often fleeting, they are firm, more firm and stable than the often fleeting conditional thoughts about loving. The Brahmaviharas are immeasurable when not intertwined with selfishness, and dependable when not compromised by greed, hatred, and delusion. They appear seamlessly when when we are at ease, and they also can feel like moving a mountain when we are at dis-ease. When we're free from strain and stress, practicing the Brahmaviharas can be nurturing. And I also believe they can provide a comfort, a balm when we are filled with strain and stress. The beauty of the Brahmaviharas or heart abodes is that they are practices that aren't only for ourselves, but they are for all beings everywhere. We start with ourselves and then work with someone close, a benefactor or person or pet or nature, in whom we can easily see their goodness and wish them well. A friend, and then a neutral person, and then a difficult person, one who gives rise to difficult feelings and thoughts. And then perhaps the hardest, all beings everywhere and without exception. And there are phrases that accompany each of the four Brahmaviharas. And we don't have enough time to go through each set of phrases often associated with each of the Brahmaviharas, but I want to briefly talk about each of them. When we recognize and are open to and acknowledge that pain and sorrow exist everywhere, we may experience an opening that moves beyond ourselves. Suffering is a thread that is a common connection through all beings, including those we may dislike vehemently, including those who cause unspeakable forms of harm. I don't share this to condone harm. I share it as an acknowledgement that we are all suffering, and too often that suffering leads to harm when we aren't aware, when we aren't mindful. We are both conditioned and taught to believe that in order for things to be right, we must change the outer conditions. The thing that's painful and challenging and difficult has to go away. I know I always fall into that trap, always. If this could just change, I would be so happy. I would be so peaceful. And the question is, can we find peace in the midst of the storm? Our level of impulse is towards that as a solution. And yes, when thinking about all of the hard injustices in the world and perhaps all of the suffering in our inner lives, we believe we need to find solutions. But we don't realize that we can't do that work when we are in reactivity mode. Terari Sala asks, can we soften without worrying about solving why we are averse? More often than not, our capacity, she teaches, to come up with a skillful means comes after we soften. Then we can see with insight and wisdom what is the most appropriate and humane thing we can do. In my talk on cultivating balance in the 8 worldly winds at the beginning of April, I shared a question that Dharma teacher Dora Williams asked me in response to my sharing about with sheer anguish about my current life circumstances. She asked me, given the external conditions, what are you going to do about it? The Brahmaviharas can support our softening without spiritually bypassing. We aren't turning away, but instead we are turning inward with courage, with compassion, with balance, with loving kindness. The Brahmavihara practices are concentration practices that point our attention to the object of the number of phrases. They are not mechanical exercises. Instead, the phrases become anchors like our awareness of breath, our awareness of sound, and our bodily sensations. They steady the mind and train it and the body to rest in the cittā, in the heart mind. We can find sanctuary and rest in these qualities. We can quiet the mind and experience refuge or sanctuary in our hearts that are boundless. Too often we find ourselves in spaces where it seems something, if not everything, is going wrong. The world is on our shoulders, job, family, relationships, children, finances, you name it. And guess what? These are the opportunities to practice, to turn inward, to face. The non-attached goal is for all beings everywhere to live without pain, violence, or any form of emotional, psychological, or physical suffering. And given the impermanence of life, it's not possible to not have pain. We can work, however, towards not suffering. So much of that suffering that occurs is because of our misery, our fear of impermanence, attachments to what we have, craving for what we don't have, hatred, delusion, and greed. And I speak emphatically when I say I know this experientially. I ask, what if all of us, without exception, could wish for life with ease, life without enmity and danger, life without hatred and animosity, life filled with happiness and generosity for all sentient beings everywhere? What world could we co-create and inhabit? Mettā, or loving kindness, builds the foundation for calmness, clarity, wisdom of heart and mind. It is detached. You can give it without accepting anything in return. And the beauty of this practice is that you receive so much from giving without expectation or attachment. Mettā is an attitude of benevolence, of goodwill toward all beings. Practicing mettā is not sentimental, nor is it affection. It is about turning, it is not also, about turning somebody we don't like into somebody we like. We're not pretending to like everyone. It's genuine and authentic. Mettā comes at our difficulties through different doorways. Compassion, Karuna. Doral Williams teaches that it is a trembling, quivering, or moving of the heart in response to one's suffering, including our own. Compassion reminds us that everyone suffers. There isn't one person who hasn't suffered at some point or another in their lives. Based on this, do we really want some person whom we don't like to experience more suffering? What would such a wish mean in terms of what we truly value in our hearts and minds of causing no harm? Compassion is not pity. When we pity someone, we are often judging their situation in a way that makes ourselves the savior in juxtaposition to them being the victim. Pity is a near enemy of compassion. What is the difference between empathy and compassion, you may ask? Empathy means you identify with someone's feelings and may even join in their suffering. Compassion, however, ignites you to take action and respond. Empathy often precedes compassion. Compassion, however, is more cognitive in nature. Dharma teacher Khanda Mason shares that Mudita, or sympathetic joy, vicarious joy, is one of the highest places where our hearts resides. It's bigger than a personal pleasure. It's welcoming and less suffering for another and are really affected by their happiness. It is the deep, wonderful feeling. Mudita teaches us to have joy for others. Happiness is not a resource of commodity. The sun shines everywhere. We must acknowledge and simultaneously redirect the fear of deprivation to the belief in abundance. Mudita is the antidote to envy and jealousy, comparison and greed. And one way to do that is to practice gratitude, even when everything feels upside down and inside out in our lives. I invite us to cultivate gratitude. And this is not gratitude for the material things, gratitude for the sun, for the trees, for breath, for awareness, for movement. Mudita, like mettā, or loving kindness, is boundless. Its hindrances include judgment, comparing, prejudice, demeaning, selfishness, and boredom. And it's easy to fall into envy. It's easy to tap into the greed and hatred and delusion with mudita. And mudita is an invitation to turn towards joy and gratitude. And when it's really hard, call on those images of babies laughing and toddlers running and experiencing joy. Tap into that joy. It is really one of the profound teachings that I'm grateful to have learned from Terweri. And a short poem attributed to the Persian Muslim poet Hafiz says, even after all this time, the sun never says to the earth, you owe me. Look what happens with a love like that. It lights the whole sky. Upekkhā, equanimity, supports our managing of internal reactions to what is true, including those qualities that we may not want to face within ourselves and also externally. Equanimity serves as an anchor to keep us grounded amid the groundlessness that life offers. It keeps us from being swept in those 8 worldly winds. And these winds are vicious and can happen when we least expect them. Upekkhā, equanimity, balance, allows us to witness and be fully present for impermanence. Equanimity supports our tuning in instead of zoning out. It's in these brief or long glimpses of reality as it is, not as we want it to be, that we can truly discern and develop razor-sharp clarity about what is really happening. Equanimity provides an elevated perspective, which gives us a broader landscape. Now, the Brahmaviharas are not milk toast or sappy. They are truly fierce in their unique heart qualities. And these practices are not linear. They are cyclical. They are in harmony with each other. With mettā, when mettā, loving kindness, turns toward difficulty, it flowers into karuna, compassion, which flowers into mudita, sympathetic joy, empathetic joy. And our mudita protects our compassion practice from falling into despair. And our compassion practice protects our joy from an ungrounded exuberance. And upekkhā, equanimity, and balance is the grounding force that holds them all together in this beautiful cyclical dance. So in closing, questions that Larry Yang, Asian American queer Dharma teacher, co-founder of East Bay Meditation Center, offered as part of a mettā practice, and that which I have incorporated into upekkhā practice. He says, if I can't be loving to myself or others in this moment, can I be kind? If I can't be kind to myself or others, can I be non-judgmental? If I can't be non-judgmental of myself or others, can I not cause harm? And if I cause harm to myself or others, can I cause the least amount of harm possible? Can I be kind? Can I be non-judgmental? Can I not cause harm? Can I cause the least amount of harm possible? The Brahmaviharas are our heart winds beneath our sails when we are flying high and when we are laying low. They are here for us unconditionally. And when we practice them, we share the merits with all, and they reverberate and come back to us. But we do not practice them expecting anything in return. Thank you. So now, we're at quarter of, I'm going to stop, invite questions, reflections, and I will stop the recording. Let me do that just to honor people's space to be able to speak freely, and just, any reflections about the Brahmaviharas. So I want to offer a mettā meditation by Osho Zenju Earthlyn Manuel, Zen priest, Black lesbian, author of numerous books, including her most recently published Opening to Darkness, 8 Gateways for Being with the Absence of Light in These Unsettling Times. And this meditation is featured in the book African Wisdom, New Voices Talk, Black Liberation, Buddhism, and Beyond, edited by Valerie Mason John, also known as Vimalasara. Zenju writes, "May all beings be cared for and loved, be listened to, understood, and acknowledged despite different views. Be accepted for who they are in this moment. Be allowed to live without fear of having their lives taken away or their bodies violated. May all beings be well in its broadest sense. Be fed, be clothed, be treated as if their life is precious. Be held in the eyes of each other as family. May all beings be appreciated, feel welcomed anywhere on the planet. Be freed from acts of hatred and desperation, including war, poverty, slavery, and street crimes. Live upon the planet housed and protected from harm. Be given what is needed to live fully without scarcity. Enjoy life, living without fear of one another. Be able to speak freely in a voice and mind of undeniable love. May all beings receive and share the gifts of life. Be given time to rest. Be still and experience silence. May all beings be awake." Thank you, everyone, for your presence, for your practice, engagement. Thank you.
Back to you, Aishah.